My mother is from here. She's a Jicarilla Apache. My father is an Oklahoma Choctaw, and I actually was born in Oklahoma to the Choctaw people in Oklahoma, and that's where I went to school. But most of the summers we were here on the reservation, so I kind of grew up with my grandpa and my grandmother out at their ranch at Hillcrest. So we spent a lot of time out there. Really didn't come to town that much. So my education comes from that. I was the only person of color from first grade till I graduated. There was nobody else except, me is brown. And what was interesting about my school, if I can share this story, is I never went back. I don't know why I thought that, there was prejudice and racism and stuff in the school, but we had a 50-year reunion like a couple years ago, and I went, and I haven't seen those students for 50 years. As you get older, your perspective changes, and I thought about it, for my school. Those students were never like that toward me. They've always been friendly and kind, and I don't know where I picked that up, but probably maybe just TV or media or whatever, that I made up this whole idea or story that they were racist against me or whatever, and they never were. It's just interesting. My family, the Velarde family from here, we really promote and support education. And so when I graduated, it was just kind of understood that you go to college. So I did. I just went on to college. I just went on and worked for my master's in business at UNM. I always love to talk about my mother. She was raised on the reservation. She went to school here. I think they only went up to eighth grade. I'm not sure, but she was a boarding school, student. And then from there she went on to Albuquerque Indian School back then, and then from there she went for her nursings. And I always say that in her generation of women, that she was a pioneer, because not very many people left the reservation, and my mother did. She got her nursing degree, and then she went to Oklahoma to an Indian hospital there to work, and that's where she met my father. And I guess we picked that up too, us, that we always want to be adventurous, and do new things. It's a big contrast between, going to school in Oklahoma, because we had running water and we had indoor restrooms. And in Oklahoma, there was a lot of little towns, and we lived, usually on the outskirts of town. But when we came out here to the reservation, we were out there at the ranch. There's no running water, there was no electricity, not any of those things out there. So it was a really good experience, because, things that I took for granted weren't there. And my grandmother, she didn't speak English. And I asked my aunts and my uncles about it, because most people, in her generation, when they were here on the reservation, they were round up and put in the boarding schools. And she never was. So I asked what happened, and they said they hid her very well. So she never learned English. My grandpa spoke English. He spoke English and Spanish and I don't know what else, but he knew a lot of languages, but not her. They always tell us not to talk about that, and that's how they were, talk about it. But now that we're talking about those boarding school errors, they brought them over there, and they would put DDT in their hair to kill the lice. She said it would turn their hair orange. And I've heard stories of people saying that the dorm matrons were really terrible to them, and stories of them being, having to kneel down on broomsticks and for hours and hours, or for not being able to speak the language. And some of them said that their parents would come see them, on weekends, and the dorm matrons would stand right there to make sure that they weren't telling their parents what was really going on in the dorms. But I can also tell you another story from my cousin. She was telling me that, where they lived, they were very poor. They lived out on the reservation. They lived in a tent, and I don't know how many, there was lots of them, 10 kids probably or more. And she said that when they were taken to the dorms, they appreciated it because they had beds, they had food, you know, they had all those amenities that they didn't have, and it wasn't as hard as living out on the reservation. She said that they just kept their head down, and they didn't make waves, or they didn't, you know, they didn't want to be punished like some of the other students were. In my conventional education, you know, learning what it is that's important to white man, you know, it's all about capitalism, and some with power, and some wanting to control these natural resources, you know, to make money on it. You know, it's a threat because Native people, you know, we've gained our right for sovereignty after all this history, and because we're sovereign nations, you know, we don't pay tax, which is a big thing for capitalists, you know, to make money. The government wants the money, but we don't pay it, and we have a big support, you know, from some of our Congress people about our sovereignty and trying to maintain that. So we, Jicarillas, we have over 1 million acres of land that we control, you know, and the government doesn't control it, and that's what I think they don't like. They want to control all this. So I think that that's a big threat for them. And there's other things about our way of life, you know, that has changed. It's a big history. It's really hard to try to get into all the history that's happened to the people. And I think it is the education system that was probably the worst system that they put in place to erase or delete the way that our mindsets, our perceptions, or the way that we view the environment, you know, the natural world. It's probably the worst thing that they've ever done to us. And from what I'm learning from the Apache way of life, because, you know, I told you I had gone through the education system, and I've worked for the tribe for many, many years. And I started off with when I was a teenager, you know, working in the summers, and then I moved up because I had a really good math background. So I worked in the accounting office as a teenage, you know, employee, and then I got a job in the higher education program. So I just worked my way up. When a lot of it was education programs. I went to business school. So I learned about what it is that's important when you're in business. And the bottom line is profit. You know, and it depends on your management style, you know, how you want to get to that profit, or how you want to expand your business. You know, and it's all about control. For some people it's power, and it's money. And that's that whole white man system. And I always tell people, if you go to any of those businesses, follow the money, and you're going to find who's all behind us and what their goal is. And it is, a lot of time it's about that. And I always tell the story about I was the assistant controller for the tribe for like some good 10 years. And, you know, the controllers would come and go, but we had this one white guy they hired because he was a CPA as a controller for the tribe. And I was the assistant controller. So I took him out, just kind of toured him around the reservation, and he looked at the land. You know how beautiful our reservation is. And the thing he told me was, wow, you guys are so lucky. You have prime real estate. And that's you know, it just fits right into what I'm telling you about, that it's all about how can you make your resources produce. You know, the trees, there's value. The ground, there's value. You know, even under the ground, there's value. It's all about value. And that's what we learned a long time ago, you know, in our history. Because at one time, there was a scalp industry. And it was all about the value of a scalp. You know, they were, what are they, $20 a scalp, I think they were paying. And so it's been that way as long as we've been, you know, in contact with the Western society, even the Spanish people that came up here. It's all been about that. And it's all coming from Europe, the European nations, you know, Spain and England and Germany, all of them. It's all about that. But the thing that my sister and I went to China, and one of the things we found out about the people from this side is that they weren't like that. You know, they had boats, and we believe that sure they came across, you know, they came and we interacted with the Chinese and the Japanese, and a lot of their ways of life is pretty similar, you know, to the way that we believe that we're connected to the world and the earth and the natural environment. It's all in language, you know, and I'm not a fluent speaker. I'm learning, so that's another one of my ideas, because I can say that I'm a novice philosopher, because I love to understand about Apache ways. And it is in language. As I listen to them speak about, you know, some of the things that you hear from Brian and Maureen about the power of things, the way the trees and the animals could talk at one time. And I believe a lot of that, because we've just lost it. And when the elders tell me, you know, and they call them myths, you know, the Western world say myth. No, if you look at those stories, you can actually find research that supports what they're telling us. And I remember one of the grandmas would always tell us about the power of our language. If we have one mind, what you can do. You know, she believed that we could change the world if we all had one mind, if we just put our minds to it. And she tells stories about in the old days when the enemy were around and they were in tall grass, and they would all get together and they would pray, one mind to turn invisible, and they would be invisible, and these soldiers wouldn't see them. You know, there's books out there that you can find that prove, you know, this idea of the connectivity that we are. I don't know if you read the book, The Hidden Message of Water. You know, that's a big one. Have you seen that one? You know, it's a Japanese scientist, and he had the kind of cameras that could actually film water crystals. So he would do these experiments based on feelings and energies that you send to this water. So in the book, you can actually see pictures of things that are just beautiful, perfect. And he says, we sent love to this water, and this is the picture that came from those water crystals. And they're just perfect and beautiful. And then he showed one of when they send hate and you know, all the negative energies to the water, and that water is just real convoluted and dirty and ugly, you know. So it ties into the stories of our Apache people. My aunt told me this story about her. She said that when they were young, that they were out playing, and they were starting to talk about somebody, you know, real negative comments about some person. And she said their grandma came out there and admonished them, don't say that about them, because you could harm them. Spit those words out, because you can harm people by saying things about them. So she learned that lesson, you know, from her grandmother about not saying stuff. In our way, you know, we had ways to deal with this already. You know, it may not be something as scientific as these books and the research and stuff, but they knew it. They knew the ways, and they would tell them in a really, you know, a cool way of these analogies that they use, which is the same thing. We want to send love, that we all rise together. And I have to talk about human beings, because we're all human beings. It's a creation, you know, when we talk about our deities that created it. From what I understand, they tell me that we're all part of it. You know, we're not separate from it. You know, some of them say that it was created for us to survive, but, you know, we depend upon each other to survive. It's not just the human beings. And there's a word in Apache that describes this, and Ilis, you know how we're all even? Yes, Ilis Kego. It means that we're all even. Everything is even. We're not any better than the trees, or we're not any better, you know, than the earth. We're all even. And that was, I learned that from one of our elders, Raymond Tafoya. When we were building the culture center, you know, our elders group was part of that, and we got funding so that we could redo the culture. We called it the culture center at that time, and they all got involved in the furniture and the furnishing and what they wanted. You know, they wanted a wood stove, and so we made all this happen for them. And one of the things that Ray Tafoya said, he wanted a round table for our meeting because of that concept, Ilith Kego. we're all equal at this table, and there's going to be nobody sitting at the head of our table. And that's a concept that they believed in, long ago. So, those are the kind of teachings that, with us, that we're trying to do is to bring that back, because those are Apache teachings that we've been long gone, lost because of our education system, because, the education wants us to make our Native people, in their image, which is capitalism and, power, this hierarchy that they have, well, I'm the boss and blah, blah, and it really doesn't work for us. So, and it hasn't worked. So I think that's some of the stuff that I think there's really good values that we need to bring back and to explain it to our people why. And I like it that, we have Maureen here and Brian to discuss the why of it, because that's always our question. Well, why? Why do you do it like this? Well, he has lots of stories to tell you about how come we're set up the way we are. And it's not always perfect, because there are some things that, we've changed. I'm learning too, I practice as much as I can. And now I'm working on language. One of them is a mentorship project, because we have a lot of people in the community who understand Apache, but they don't speak it. So we want to mentor them with somebody who's fluent to get them comfortable speaking Apache. So you're already halfway there as far as bringing fluent speakers. That's one project. The other one is a new method for teaching Apache, which is all structured around morphemes. I'm picking up a lot of it when I listen, because I understand the very basic words, the sounds, the very basic ones. So I'm developing this language program for adults, because young people, just immerse them in it. They're going to pick it up. Young people, it's different. But this is for the adults, and it's like our brains are a little crystallized, it's a little stiff. So we have different ways of learning. So that's what I'm developing. When I do this system or the structure of prayer, most indigenous languages are very descriptive. And when you can describe something, a lot of the emotions come in. And one of the words that I hear a lot is njo. And I know the Navajos have a really good way of describing that word, what it means. It's kind of like that you're striving for perfection or balance or this idea of ileskego, that it's all equal. That's that word njo. But in the language, when you say njo go is for me, it's a creation word. When you pray, you're creating the space. It has to do with space and time around you. So when you're speaking Apache, you're always creating. It's a creation. You're creating. So when you talk about the natural environment, it's like our world is always as lived. It's about the experience that you are. So to me, it's just me, because when I'm learning the language, I understand that I'm speaking a language that's in this moment, in this present, and I'm creating my environment around me. That's why prayers are so important and powerful, because they're being thankful for what is given to us, by the Creator. They're thankful that in my own life that I go down the straight road, that I pray for that. And I'm creating it through language. I'm saying it, and then they get into being grateful for the things around us, like when you talk about environment, it's like the water, we're thankful for the land that we live on. We're thankful for all the things that have been provided for. We're thankful for our children. We're thankful that we're part of this great nation. We're thankful that we're still here, because Jicarillas could have easily been one of those tribes that are extinct, but we're still here. So it's that language that we create this environment. So when we're talking about how can we use that to affect our environment, before the Europeans came and introduced all these new ideas to us, the Apache people could do those things because it's through their prayer, through language. I just told you about a story about one mind, and they could disappear, because they had that long ago, and it can be brought back because they've done it. And in our community, this is one thing I'm hoping I can share with the community. They said it takes 1% of the population. So 1%, one of the games that we were trying to introduce, we have them standing in a circle. And then there's a bucket in the middle. I don't know what you call that. There's a bucket in the middle, and everybody picks up a pedal. And the idea, this idea of one mind, that you teach them how to help each other. It's not competition. It's not about the competition. And they all, concentrate on having everybody hit that bucket in the middle. It's just so everybody has a chance to throw. You throw, and you keep doing it until everybody in the whole circle hits the can. So that teaches them how we're all connected, and you can, through the power of your mind, to help each other. And we're not competitive. Play this game, and I start understanding that we're here to help each other. None of us can move forward until we all succeed hitting that thing, and then we can move forward. But we can't until we all hit it. I notice that whenever that we have our bear dance, because there's always a lot of people involved in that. I don't know if you notice that, Brian, but after a bear dance, how things are different here. It's real positive. It's really good. Everybody feel good about it for a while, and more of that needs to happen. Because they're in prayer. They're one mind when they do that, and it's a great experience. And it's like, if you're an observer like me, and you can see it with your own eyes, then yeah, look, it's great for us. It's positive. How do we do more of it? We're no longer in balance with it. When we talk about historic trauma and generational trauma, in my mind, it's like, well, yeah, that happened. Let's just get over it. I didn't realize that there's this thing they call epigenetics, that this thing that attaches to your DNA. So if our people has trauma in the past, that means that gets passed down just on, from your DNA. And that really, I didn't even know that. And I was thinking about that. I said, no wonder, you look in your own little space and you look at the people around you, you think, wow, well, that's epigenetics. That describes it. That's what it is. So I think about my own life, myself with the historic trauma, and my mother going through boarding school experience, what she went through. And I was thinking, wow, because when you talk about that stuff, I can feel it. It's like I get choked up about it, even though it never happened to me. But I feel the effects of it, which is interesting. And I never thought about that until now. We just have a hard time getting over it, getting over the boarding school experience, our inability to really work well together. We've adopted a lot of those Western ideas and thoughts that aren't working for us. I'm elder now, and I want to make sure that I do the best I can to make a difference in this world while I'm here, because, Brian said he doesn't want to die without passing on what he knows. I think someone told me, what do you want on your gravesite on your gravestone when you pass? And somebody said, all used up. Yeah, I want to be all used up too. I want to give everything I can while I'm alive, while I'm here. And so I'm doing whatever I can, because this is my life's work now. I want the language to come back to people, but I want them to understand what that means. It's not just it's not just conversation. There's more in there. To know who you are as an Apache, because I'm still learning. I'm not saying that I'm the Apache and look at me. No, I'm saying we're learning, and I would love to have someone help me learn. Let's learn it together, all of us, because it's going to take all of us. I have a book that estimated the kind of population that was in North America. They're estimating some 14, 17 million people. At the end of the Western expansion, there was less than, I can't remember the number, 100,000 all these people that were completely wiped off. Even with Jicarilla, Dr. Tiller estimates there was some 14, 15,000 Apache people. At one time in the 1900s, we were 588 that were here on the reservation. We're lucky that we had friends that helped us, because it was disease. Before that, it was, loss of, our starving. The buffalo, was wiped out. All these things that happened, but now we're on the reservation. It was mainly disease because we're all, together. So you look at that, 14, 17, 16 million people wiped off. 16 million. What do the Western society think is the best thing for Native people, to educate people? Well, they put up these museums of arts and crafts. It's basically, oh, look at, they make nice baskets, but they don't talk about that genocide, not a whole lot about it. So in Washington, D.C., they have that museum, the Indian Arts Museum, and right next to it is the Holocaust for the Jews. 6 million people killed in the Holocaust, 6 million. And it's all about the Holocaust. But over here, 15 million people wiped off the planet, and it's all about their arts and crafts. So I say, let's change the conversation. If you want us to heal, you can. One of the things I know people are doing is this land recognition or acknowledgement. That's a good. It's good that you can acknowledge land. I don't know if have you seen that?
Oh, I've seen.
Yeah, they do that. It's a start. But I said, well, let's start a new conversation. These museums should not be arts and crafts museums. They should be memorials. Because they have veterans memorials to recognize all of our veterans that, what happened to them for the wars. Why not Native American memorials? Because that's what it is. It's memorials. All our people are gone because of it. And, it's that epigenetics, I was telling you about the trauma that we've gone through and how it affects me when I see some of those things about those children in those boarding schools. And even now I talk about it, chokes me up because, those are our relatives, those are our family, those are our children, So how do we get the bigger community to recognize that? Everybody in this United States are immigrants. Everybody, except for the indigenous people. And that's a true statement. Everybody is an immigrant. So when I speak with people, I say, well, where are you from? Who are your people? Well, your people aren't, from here, they're from wherever, But I always recognize, too, when people tell me, I said, I did DNA, and I found out that I have a great-great-grandfather who was Irish. That's where that name Willis comes from. My name's Lorene Willis. Willis is an Irish name. That's where it comes from. Because my great-great-grandfather's name was Tom Willis. And he had his son, who was half Choctaw, James Willis, who had his son, Levi Willis, who was a quarter. And my dad was an eighth. That makes me want to say, it just passes out that Irish. And this idea of epigenetics, because I always come back to that because, I went to Ireland, and there was something about that land. It was just, I was just connected somehow, and it was weird because I've been, like I said, I went to Japan. Not Japan, China. I've been down in South America. I've been to all these other places, but Ireland was the one that reached me somehow. And it was kind of interesting, for me to think about that. And I think this epigenetics is something that I'm going to start looking into because I think we're all affected by it. So my friends, when I ask them, where are you from? Who are your people? And some people are from Spain. And I said, have you ever been back to Spain? And a lot of them, some of them will say, yeah. I said, what's it feel like when you go to Spain? What do you feel? Do you feel like you're home? Is there something about it? And they'll start talking about it, and it's just kind of interesting. I think it helps me to realize that we're, as human beings, because I like to go back to the human being. That's basically all of us. We're all human beings. We come from somewhere, And we need to help each other, because what's happening with our environment and our planet right now in this moment isn't going to change until we all come together. And what our grandma or our aunt told us about one mind. We have one mind together. We can actually change this world out here, but we have to come together. And all of this, it's all connected. It's your belief system, and I believe strongly that together. That's why I don't think that one person can do. I think we need each other, and we need each other to heal our planet. And then one thing I talk about prophecies, because they did talk about and I heard prophecies back in the 1970s. I heard this guy talking about all these things that were going to happen. This is before cell phones. Before all of this, and I got a chance to listen to all these elders talk about prophecies. And there were some things that I heard at that time that didn't make sense to me. One of the gentlemen was talking about that there would be this spider that would build a web around the world, and people would talk across these webs, from the spider. And at the time, I heard him say, we think that's the telephone, because you can pick up a telephone, call somebody on the other side of the world. But now we know it's not the telephone, it's the World Wide Web. And I heard that, back in the 70s when I was in my 20s. Another one was water. They were talking about how water was going to be so precious that people would pay a lot of money for water. And at the time, water was so in abundance. You could drink it out of the springs. You had well water. It was just like, what's going to happen to us? Is there going to be no more water or what? And now we know that, just when those little things of water is over $1 to buy water, and we're polluting the planet because of all the plastic that's going back into the planet because of that idea of water. They said that the rivers would flow in reverse. But the thing about, they're talking about all these hard times. We're going to have some hard times come among us. So we have to depend on each other to survive. But they said that there would be a day when peace would come around the world. And the way they explained it, there would be these hoops. Hoops. To me, it's all the different groups or organizations. It was a hoop. These hoops would connect all around the world. And when that day comes, we would have peace, and peace was going to last a long time. And he said, when that day come, it would be such a wondrous and beautiful day that even the grass would push itself up to be a part of that day. And and those are the kind of stories that were told to us, because I experienced it, and that's why I'm passionate about what I do, because I was fortunate, I was privileged. I've done so many things in my life that sent me on that path, and I got a chance to hang with Apache elders for 13 years that we were with them, and we traveled with them, and we took them, and I just hung around them. I've seen them do things that were, to me, are miraculous, and I believe so strongly in them. And I know that they gave Brian, because he was the heritage specialist, I was the director there, and Brian had a great relationship with him because he could speak Apache, and they just looked up to him. They trusted him, they looked up to him, and they taught him a lot of things. And some of the ladies would sit with me and they would tell me stuff, because it's all about learning how to conduct yourself around an elder. And I learned it. I wasn't like that when I started. I didn't know. And they always tell us, don't ever give up. They tell us that don't ever give up. So that future that we're talking about that's so horrendous and hard, they said to push it into the future as much as you can. And that's a lot of the stuff that they did was that. They knew of these prophecies, and they would push it as far into the future as they can. So that's what we're up to. We're wanting to share what we know and what we have with our people. It's because we want to push that future out, but they say it's coming. To me, it's like incorporate language, Itzata, long ago, to use some of the language when you're telling these stories. And to just tell stories of a young child, back in the day before the Europeans came among us. What was the life for a child in those days? What was it like? when we were living on the plains and there was enemy around, you had to train your child to be quiet because the enemy could be there. So they learned that. But the other, I think we learned that real well, but the other part of it is when it's safe and, you know, all your people are in a safe place and that they could play. They had a lot of games how they used to play, the kids, and they would come together and they would play. And I believe that some of the stuff that they're taught today about competition, it wasn't there. The people, they were more about helping each other. We helped each other. We were a big family. We helped each other to go out on a buffalo hunt and what it meant, you know, to accompany the warriors and the hunters to go out. What's it like, you know, to go out there? And usually the young people, their responsibility was just to hold the horses together, you know, keep the horses from taking off while the men, you know, it's stories like that, you know. I think that we need more of that, you know. When we talked about the idea of prayer and one mind all together, that you really can transform and manipulate what's around you. You know, what's happening, you know, the global warming and all this stuff that's happening that we really can do something about, but it takes more than just one of us. It takes all of us, you know, with this collective mind that we are. When you have strong energy, I guess, and you can connect with your environment. It's that connection that we are as indigenous people with the land. And I mean, I still believe in that idea of epigenetics. And it's not just the trauma, but it's the stuff that gets passed to us. You know, the survival skills, the things that we're connected to, and that's how come we're the way we are. We're connected to the land. Because, you know, our people have been that way for centuries. It's experiencing it. That's why at the Culture Center we had camps. We always did camps. We wanted to take those children out to those places and camp and give them the experience, because they're always going to remember it. And they're going to remember, especially that one I was telling you, that we went to San Carlos with 11 kids from the court systems. And we took them down, we took them away. You know, they didn't have no cell phones, any of that stuff. We took them away and we took them out to nature. And they lived Apache life for 4 days, I think we were there. And we had the other Apaches helping us. And it was all about the experience of it. And they came back and it's something they'll never, and I always remember what they're telling us about the judge, because, you know, the prosecutor helped us a lot. He was Apache and he was all supportive of it and he helped us and we did that camp. And we brought them back, and the judge was amazed. He said, all those young boys came and shook his hand, said, thank you, you know, for sending me to this camp. And one of the grandpas said, what did you do to my grandson? Remember he told you that? What did you do to my grandson? Because he was so different, respectful. And that's what the experience can do. And you can do that, to me, you can do that with anybody. You know, if you, it's the experience of it. It's not, you know, lecture or, and it wakens up, you know, it wakes up what's there that's dormant. I think a lot of people connect with the Mother Earth. They just don't understand, especially people that hike. You know, when you go out on a hike and you see nature and how people get rejuvenated because they're camping or they're hiking in the woods. I think everybody feels that with indigenous Apache people. You know, this is home. We're always going to be connected here, but when we go out to those out there where we know our people were, that's home too, and there's a connection there, and we feel it. But I think that because we're tribal, you know, we're tribal, so all of us here, we're all related to each other one way or the other. You know, we have blood that connects us. So we're always, this is home. It's always, I can go move someplace else and work and whatever, but I come back and this is home. And I don't know about the Western world and how it is for them. I don't know, because probably you could ask questions and they can maybe look at themselves and say, okay, what feels like home to you? You know, you could live in Denver and that's home. And then you go over here and live somewhere else and that's home. Are you really connected with the land when you move from place to place to place? Are you really? I don't know. But I know that we're home when we're with our people. Like, you know, right now they're having that ceremony, the coming out feast. They're appreciating, you know, where they are. You know, most of it's natural. you know, the feeding of our people to appreciate. It's like you're there to eat, but you're also there to support the family and what's happening with the young girl, you know, the young girl and the young boy. You're there to, it's all one big family event, you know, everybody's there to support what's happening, so everybody participates by sharing food and all this. The trees that they use for the teepee and the wood that they're using, you know, it's all about the nature. It's helping to keep the environment clean, you know, like you're taking all the dead wood. They burn dead wood, they don't take fresh trees and burn it. They take all, and so they're cleaning it up by burning all this old wood that's out there, and they're helping the people by feeding every. You know, it's a big thing. And then at the end, you clean it all up, and it's like you were never there. And I was remember someone told me that her grandma told her, you pick up every little piece of paper that you see. You pick it all up. Don't you leave a little teeny piece of paper out there. So they clean it up really well. How we speak affects our perceptions of the world. So if I'm here being positive about the world, you know, it affects what I do, my actions. My actions are, I believe that, you know, because I speak it, you know, I present, I talk to people about language, how important it is and stuff. So there's science around it. You know, she talks about, which I noticed too, she talks about this indigenous, they're Aboriginal, I think it's an Aboriginal tribe in Australia, and their language. In their language, you know, they don't have words for right and left or front, or, you know, theirs is all about the sun and the directions. So they'll say, well, to the east is blah blah, or to the south, you know, that's how they speak. They don't have right, left. It's in the language. So that means that they're always cognizant of the sun and where it is. And I notice that because that's one of the things I notice about some of our folks, that they always notice where the sun is, always. You know, when you go to bed, where's this? You know, what direction is east? Where does the sun come up? Stuff like that. So that connects you. You know, that's a connection to the natural environment because of the sun. The sun, you know, the prayers of the sun and what it provides for us, and how the plants grow and all of it. You know, it's all about the sun. So I think that in the language, it's important when they talk about the descriptions of it. You know, the sun. You know, the name of it from the east is coming, and then when it's out here in noon, the name of it, and the name when it's on this side. The sun goes like this. The sun, it comes up and it goes, it doesn't go straight over, it goes like this. So we go with the sun. That's us. We go with the sun. That's how we say it. So, you know, it's all in language. It's our perception about language, how we speak. It affects our perceptions of the world, even with the you know, our greeting word tanjo. You know, tanjo, it means, what I'm told, it means like njo. I talk about njo, that word njo. But da is like a exemplifier. So you're saying njo, things are about, things are good. Da, but you're saying it exemplified da and jo. It's, you know, so that's why when you talk to someone like Maureen, I'll say tanjo, she'll say, oh, yes, tanjo. Yeah, so we've Anglicized it by bringing the word down to mean hello, when actually it doesn't mean hello. You know, it means a lot more. So we're I don't know what you call slang, Englishizing our language. You know, we're watering it down, you know, to fit English, and we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't make it fit. We need to keep it the way it is in its pure form, because that's the only way we're going to learn it and change the perception by the language that we speak, because we're speaking old-timey Apache. It's all about this idea of you know, that the Mother Earth sustains us. She provides everything we need. It's all there. It's already there for us. but we just need to learn it again.